Hi, fifth graders. Welcome back to Wit and Wisdom in Sync. I'm Ms. Foley, and this is day 3. We'll continue our work in Module 1, Cultures in Conflict. You will need a few materials for this lesson. They include Handout 3B, Handout 3C, Assessment 4, Focusing Question Task 1, and Wit and Wisdom in Sync Journal and something to write with. If you need any of these materials, please pause the video now and retrieve them.
Ladies and gentlemen, this should be in your folder for today. So under January 11th through the 14th, okay? And you will also find your boxes and bullets organizer under upcoming, but all of these will be in the folder below for this week. You will not need a pen or a pencil either, as your Wit and Wisdom journal. We will end up just writing that in Notability. So send all 3 of these to Notability.
In this lesson, we'll deepen our knowledge of how westward expansion really did impact Native American cultures in the West. At the end of the lesson, you'll be ready to show your understanding by completing Focusing Question Task 1. What have you learned so far about how the U.S. westward expansion impacted or affected the lives of Native Americans in the West? If you have a learning partner, take a moment to share aloud your ideas. And if not, you can jot them down in your journal or just say them aloud. Pause the video now and take a moment to think about this question and share your ideas. Today we're going to revisit the article called A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country, and we're going to identify the main ideas and key details. We're going to look specifically for how U.S. westward expansion impacted Native Americans in the West. Doing all that work will prepare you to summarize the article and express that knowledge in Focusing Question Task 1. All right, now you're going to need your article. It's on Handout 3B, and it's called A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country. You'll also need your boxes and bullets organizer on Handout 3C. Pause the video now if you need to retrieve those. When we first read the article's introduction, we underlined a lot of key ideas. And in the first paragraph, we learned that the Lewis and Clark expedition put boots on the ground in the West, which opened the new territory for expansion. And in that second paragraph, we learned that gold and the prospect of open lands attracted so many Americans to move west. We also learned that the process of westward expansion didn't happen peacefully, and it had an enormous impact on Native Americans who lived in the West for centuries. We used those key ideas to come up with a statement to capture the text's overall main idea. And here's the overall main idea statement that I came up with. After the Lewis and Clark expedition, European Americans began moving into the Indian country to settle the lands and find gold. This expansion greatly affected Native Americans' ways of life. Since we put the main idea statement in our own words, yours might be a little bit different from mine, and that's fine, but they should both include the same important ideas. Remember that this article is written in a way that helps us understand the different aspects of westward expansion and how they impacted Native American communities. Each heading explores a different aspect. So we see new settlers, miners, and ranchers, and all of those sections support the overall main idea. Let's work together to determine the main idea, which is going to be our next box, and the key details, or bullet points, for that next section, which is called New Settlers. Then you're going to follow the same process for the sections about miners and ranchers independently. And pretty soon, you'll use all of those main ideas and details to summarize what you learned about the impact of westward expansion on Native Americans in Focusing Question Task 1. Let's reread the section New Settlers together. Follow along as I read. 3 events near mid-century unleashed a flood of American settlement across the Indian country. In 1846, a treaty with Great Britain fixed the northern boundary of the United States at the 49th parallel, securing the Americans' title to the Columbia River country. 2 years later, the discovery of gold in California began a rush that attracted 250,000 people to what had been a distant province of the young Republic of Mexico. At almost the same moment, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War and transferred a massive arc of new territory to the United States. Suddenly, the United States had become a continental power. Settlers, merchants, and entrepreneurs heading west from St. Louis were now eager to set up American institutions across the Indian country. They assumed that the land was theirs and that their needs superseded those of the existing Indian communities. By the centennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1904, more than 6 million new people had moved to the territory first visited by the Corps of Discovery. Wow! Let's see how we can group some related ideas to figure out what the main idea of this section is. Well, we see several details about the acquisition of land. There's lots of new territory being gained at this time period. We have fixed the northern boundary, which means the U.S. expanded north, and transferred a massive arc of new territory, and that was as a result of the end of the Mexican-American War. All this new territory resulted in the movement of people west. Here we have flood of American settlement, the discovery of gold, and that attracted 250,000 people. That's a lot of movement, isn't it? In the second paragraph, we see how people thought of their movement west. For example, they were eager to set up American institutions. They assumed the land was theirs, and their needs superseded, which means made more important, those of existing Indian communities. When we grouped those related ideas together, here are the big ideas that I took away from this section. First, the U.S. gained lots of territory. Second, thousands of settlers moved west. And finally, they took Native American lands as their own. So together, these ideas capture the main idea of that whole section called New Settlers. Our next step is to record a main idea statement for this section. It's kind of like telling the story of what's happening. So let's see. The United States was getting bigger, which means there's a lot more room for settlers to move westward. And as they moved west, they took over the Native American land as their own. How about this statement? As the U.S. added new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native American lands as their own. Does that statement capture the main idea of that section called New Settlers? What do you think? All right, now you're going to need to go back to handout 3C, and let's start using those boxes and bullets. So go ahead and record a main idea statement in the box called Main Idea 1, New Settlers. You can record that statement that I just came up with or your own main idea statement for that section. Now for the bullet points. What key details did the author use to show this main idea? Well, guess what? We've already identified some key ideas in the evidence that we highlighted. In fact, those are the details that helped us determine the main idea about new settlers. See how connected this is? All right, let's choose a few key details that support the main idea and record them as bullet points. One detail that really helped me understand why so many settlers headed west was this one. The discovery of gold in California began a rush that attracted 250,000 people to what had been a distant province of the young Republic of Mexico. Wow, 250,000 people headed west is a lot of people. Another detail that shows how the settlers thought about the land in the West is this one. Their needs superseded those of the existing Indian communities. The fact that their needs superseded those of Native Americans shows how little they thought about the people who had lived in the West for generations. First bullet point. I can actually make this simple and clear in my own words. Many settlers moved west looking for gold. Here's something that you can always do to make sure your key details really do match your main idea. If a key detail doesn't match, it doesn't support the main idea. So let's check. Let me read the detail again. Many settlers moved west looking for gold. Yep, here in the main idea, I included thousands of settlers pushed west. My detail includes this and it tells why they pushed west. Let's check the other detail I identified. Oh, and I do need to put it in my own words. How about this for our second bullet? Settlers thought of the land as their own, disregarding Native Americans. What do you think? Does it build out that idea that settlers took Native American lands as their own? Yes, it provides more information about that main idea, which is the job of a good detail. We can also check now to see whether our first main idea about the new settlers supports the overall main idea from the introduction. The overall main idea was, after the Lewis and Clark expedition, European Americans began moving into Indian country to settle the lands and find gold. This expansion greatly affected Native Americans' ways of life. All right, let's check the new settlers and see if it supports that main idea. As the U.S. added new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native Americans' lands as their own. What do you think? Thumbs up if you think those are aligned. Yep, I think this main idea is clearly connected to the overall main idea. Now it's your turn to capture.
Now, I would like you to hang on to these two things, or this document, in your Notability for class tomorrow. We will end up looking at miners and the spot of ranchers. So I want you just to take a moment, and if you would like to start thinking about the main idea of these two sections, you are more than welcome to. But don't write anything yet. I want you to highlight some key ideas. That's all I want you to do. So if you can find some key ideas in the rest of the article on the miners and ranchers, we will discuss the key ideas tomorrow, and then we will think of the main ideas together